essentially, I'd just like to congratulate Debbie on getting through the process, and her description of the external observation is a very fair assessment of what goes on. I'll give you it from an external observer's perspective. So essentially, what happens is the candidate says they are ready for an external observation. The Institute makes contact with us as observers, and we're told your name. And we're told, for me, I'm a secondary person, so I was told the KLA, and we are told where you actually are. And for me, I had to go down the far south coast to do my observation. So that meant for me organising my life to make sure I could get down there and see this person and make sure that everything was perfectly set up for her. I made contact with the candidate, and then we negotiated a date and a time for me to come down to her school and do the observation. Now, don't get your heart set on a particular date, because the important thing to remember is that this observer is a principal, a senior officer, could be a SED. They are usually in higher positions, and so they will need to negotiate their days as well. So don't think I'm going to plan all of these things on this particular day and they're just going to be able to come and do this for me. Because you could have the world's best plan and planning network meetings and things, and then the person says, well, I can't come on that day. So don't plan major events unless you know that that person is definitively coming on that day. So get the observation date first, and then plan what you're going to do. In terms of what my candidate sent me, she sent me an amazing amount of paperwork so that I absolutely knew what I was going to see when I arrived at that school on that day. Everything was very planned out. I was left there was no surprises. I knew exactly how I was going to see this teacher achieve these particular standards. And that's what's really important. If you can think back to if you've ever supervised a new scheme teacher going for professional competence, sometimes we absolutely want to see that standard. It's like when they present their evidence. It's almost like we want a big arrow saying, this is where I'm showing you this particular standard. So I saw lessons, and I also saw her running some professional development after a lesson for teachers from within her region. So I saw a number of things happening on the day. The thing that I would say, and I think Debbie was correct, 7 standards was probably the limit. I really think you're going to do yourself an injustice if you try and do more than that. I saw 5 standards, and that was quite a comfortable day for both of us. I think if you try and do any more, you're going to do yourself an injustice. And the Institute say exactly the same thing. They recommend 5 to 6 standards, and it doesn't have to be only from particular elements. You can bring your standards from any one of the elements. There is a bit of a myth that goes around that you can't do this or you can't do that. You can show your external observer standards from any element. And so it's important to really think carefully about what you're going to show your external observer. Now, I went down to this town. I had to leave home at 5 o'clock in the morning to get there, and I arrived, and I was introduced to the principal, and that was very nice. And I think everybody was very nervous for the candidate on the day, and so when Debbie was talking about her intern being nervous for her, I think you need to definitely think about that. You may have been observed 100 times, but you may feel a little bit more nervous on this particular day. I could say to you, don't feel nervous, because we're just classroom teachers like yourself, but it's just something that you probably will feel. So be prepared for that. And I think if you get really super nervous and you make yourself terribly sick, there is opportunity to renegotiate with the Institute if there's been some drama that happened and you don't feel like, if you were very, very ill or something on the day, you can renegotiate that observation, I believe. I think there is room to move in there. But essentially, I think all the observations I've done, and I would imagine every one of you sitting here, you're going to be at the top of your game. So we imagine that we are, everybody that I know who's an observer has never seen anybody fail yet. And I say yet, but in this room, all of you are highly professional. You got your jobs for a reason. Now, there are teachers out there who believe they're an accomplishment or leadership and who aren't and may have troubles. But I don't think it's something that you should be particularly worried and nervous about, because I know a lot of faces out in that audience and I know what tremendous professionals you are. And if all of you are at the same capability as people I know sitting there, I know you will do very well. It's just trying to get your nerves in control. Forget the observers in the room. And I know that when I did one of the observations, I joined in. There was some professional learning that went on. I tried to stay out of it, but in the end, I joined in. I was having a good time. And we had lunch and everybody made me feel most welcome. And then I took the time in the afternoon to sit and reflect on what I had seen, to genuinely decide whether I had seen this teacher meet those standards. Now, I didn't do my report on the same day. Considering I had like a 2.5 hour drive to go home, I did it within 24 hours. And the instruction from the Institute is that as an observer, we have a 24-hour time frame to get those observations into them. What you would know before I left is that I definitely saw you show me that standard, or I did not. And we would have a discussion around that. What you would factor in is a feedback session. So obviously with Debbie, your feedback session, you got to see the report. With my feedback session for one particular person, I didn't have the report written, but I could absolutely go through and tell her that I absolutely saw her achieve those standards. And it was a very positive and reassuring thing for her. And obviously I came home, I did the report, and she would have been able to see that. But I think the thing that was most important as an observer is that it was incredibly structured the day. I knew where I was going and what time I was going to be there. I knew exactly what I was going to see, so that I wasn't trying to guess at what she was trying to show me. So I think that's very important. Is there any questions that anyone has about the observation?
Yes. If you actually not pass on that, can you do it again?
You don't get a second shot at an observation, but this is where putting a number of, maybe covering things a couple of times with evidence covers you. So even if something goes wrong in your observation and you don't get the opportunity to do it again, if you've covered that standard in another way, that covers you well then. It'll still be okay.
So could you pass 3 out of 4 standards on that day?
I imagine so, yes, because each individual standard has a separate report written on it. It's not one big report that we write. We submit a report on each of the standards that you've said you're going to achieve on the day. Yes?
I imagine the majority of people in this room are heading towards PAP or by the end of the year. Does the Institute foresee there will be a lot of difficulty in negotiating dates with this many people trying to do this issue?
I don't work for the Institute, so they have never sent us any information about whether there will be difficulties. I mean, I don't know what the breakup of, a lot of you are primary, I think. So they have trained quite a number of people up, so I don't think there will be difficulty because it'll be spaced out over time. And obviously if observers are busy, they're going to renegotiate times with you. But it's probably something that when I'm speaking to Jan Donaldson at the Institute, that we can bring up and make sure that they are aware of that could be an issue.
Could we start planning a date then now? If we go away today, could we start already contacting the institute and saying setting dates up to term 3?
Look, I don't think there would be an issue with that. I think it would be in your best interest to say, I'm going to be ready to do this, and they can start putting things into place then. They might say to you, no, we'll do it closer to the time, but who knows? If you don't try, you don't get, so you never know.
Can I just say I strongly advise you do it as soon as possible, depending on the subject area, it took me 4 months to get my IELTS. From the time I said I was ready, it took 4 months to get my observation.
Right, so there's an answer. When I did some of my observations, it was literally just around about a month, but obviously when I started to do the observations, there wasn't as many hats in the mix. So yes, it could be a longer time frame, but I think I think I'd be having a discussion with the Institute as well, and probably maybe with Vicky, if you've got all of your documentation in by the end of the year and your job comes up again, I don't know where you stand. That'd be a question for...
It has to be submitted. Mine had to
Yes.
be submitted.
Yeah.
It had to be approved.
That's
it
right.
had to be submitted.
It was like when you all applied for your jobs, you had to have undertaken that initial application to even apply for the job. So you're not going to be penalised to maybe reapply for the job if you've already submitted everything and it's going through the process. Because like with accreditation at competence, people don't know what they don't know until it starts to roll through. So we don't know how long it's going to take for regional directors to do these approvals. Some regions every region will do it differently. Even though the process is similar, they will have regional processes that will make a difference to how fast your application is processed. So if you've hit that submit button, by the time your job comes up again, I don't believe there'll be any issue with you applying.